One of the most important things, or first things we shared in common, is George grew up in East Chicago, Indiana, and I grew up in Maryville, Indiana, which is one town away. So both of us being from Northwest Indiana, in an area in Indiana they call the Region area, we immediately had things in common. At the time, his mom was still living there, and my parents still lived there. And so we had a lot of common things growing up that we could talk about and relate to. To get to know George, George was a professional in every way. He was the best undercover officer I ever met. He was selfless. As you get to work with people, you become very close. And one of the things George and I would do is, one of the jobs that we have is when we seize drugs, often these drugs have to be taken to the lab, which happens to be in Chicago. And we would go together. Over the years, we would visit our families on that trip. We would have an overnight trip, and he would get to visit his mom, and I would visit my mom and dad. George is a firearms enthusiast, and one of his favorite pastimes is firing guns and going to the range. And it happens to be one of the things I love to do. And it was something I grew up doing, and it's something my father loves still to do. So we would take my father to the range. My father's not as capable as he used to be. He's almost 80 years old, and so it would be a treat to go up there with George and get to see my father and George with my father and take him to the range and get a meal together. The reason I tell that is because to kind of tell you the character of George, on this last trip just a few weeks ago, my father had a firearm that wasn't working correctly at the range. I didn't think much of it after we left the range. But George took the time when we got back here to Dayton to research and to explain and get all the instructions, everything my dad needed to fix the gun. Again, just another selfless act, and the kind of guy George was, he would do anything for anybody.
What you see there is my badge and my partner's badge. We're both brothers and friends forever, and just wanted you to know George always gave it his all. Never one to step back, but one to always step up, even to the very end. Thank you for everything that you've done for the family and for Dayton.
You were my friend. I had anticipated being treated like a rookie, the rookie that I was. But you made me feel like an equal, and you made me understand that we were a family. And I can say with full confidence that I'm not alone in that sense of inclusion. This is a tremendous loss, but if I know George, he would not want it to bend us or to break our brotherhood. Fate whispers to the warrior, "You cannot withstand the storm." But the warrior whispers back, "I am the storm." Jorge Del Rio was a warrior, and an absolutely fierce one. I'm so blessed to have the many memories that we share together, of my nickname Lala, and to have been part of your family.
George actually has a plaque hanging behind his desk in big, bold words that says, "Courage, being scared to death, but saddling up anyway." George always saddled up. As an undercover narcotics cop, George lived up to what we believe in. He was a true representation of unity, strength, integrity, and honor. A true shadow warrior.
We instantly built a friendship because George and I both love to eat good food and to eat out and try new restaurants. George would always tell me that you could never do your best police work on an empty stomach. It was during those times, during the years we worked together, George sort of became a mentor to me in many ways, by passing down his knowledge and expertise with his investigations in the field he and I worked in. George was a consummate professional with a strong work ethic who was dedicated to the police department and dedicated to the DA as a task force officer.
Jorge Del Rio, a brother, best friend for life, a person who's always sticks up for you and always there to help. That was the definition of Jorge Del Rio. Came to know George years ago because we were academy classmates. And then after the academy, we were assigned to the West Side and the 3rd District together. And the friendship just took off from there. George's devotion to his family was evident when they invited friends and brothers over. And George's devotion of love to his wife was even more evident because we would stay up to the late hours of the morning and watch TV with G.I. Joes surrounding us and his zoo in the basement. Then when it was time for Kathy to go to bed, he would pause the movie and go up and tuck her in. And instead of just sitting there, used to call him, well, still call him George Del Rio and the Del Rioettes, because that's all he had was girls. And they were raised in a good family, good house. And George probably received that from his mother. I visited his mother with George spontaneously and on planned trips in East Chicago. Funny side of George Del Rio is the Del Rio luck. We were parking one day in a parking lot, and he was trying to find a parking spot, and he's like, "Oh, that's Del Rio luck." "What's that, George?" "Got a parking spot right here up front." So even in this tragedy, Del Rio luck still happens because Naya, Pete, and my wife Mary went to get breakfast Tuesday morning for everybody. They left the parking garage, went about, came back, and Naya said, "Hey, my parking spot's still there," and spontaneously, all three of them said, "Del Rio luck."
The first day I met George, he came into the Dayton resident office, came over to my cubicle, and in George fashion said, "Who are you?" I was taken back by his approach, identified myself, and he presented me with a license plate and a description of a vehicle that was parked in our parking lot. He said, "Kid, you got a stolen car in the parking lot of your building." And I kind of shrugged it off. I went to the Leeds terminal, ran the license plate, and determined that, guess what? He was exactly correct. The car was stolen out of the west side of Dayton. And I knew at that point that George Del Rio was the real deal. So George had an uncanny ability of getting the best parking spot anywhere. When we would, we'd go places, George would find a spot, and he'd pull into it. It'd be 4 feet from the door. He'd look over at me and he goes, "That's Del Rio parking." I kind of shrugged it off, and it continued for the rest of our time together. Well, it made such an impact on me that I began to repeat it in the presence of my family. My oldest daughter began driving about a year ago, and she pulled into a parking spot in upstate New York, and guess what came out of her mouth? She looked over at me and she said, "Del Rio parking."
One of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. He really was. He's just the kind of guy that would laugh. He had a crazy laugh, just type. I can't do it. I'm sick. I'm sorry, but if you've heard him laugh, you knew what it was. You could hear him all the way down the hallway. And one thing we used to try to do, we had a group. We had a little called the lunch bunch. And the lunch bunch, George's thing and his saying, he'd like to sit down and break bread like gentlemen. No eating in the car, no, whatever, in a hurry. So if you want to sit down, go someplace, you break bread like gentlemen. So, okay. So George drugged me into one of the local Mexican food restaurants, and that was known, I guess, for a couple people getting sick out of there. So I said, "George, I'm not eating this place." He goes, No, trust me, come on. Takes me in this place, and he goes, "You got to watch." He goes, "You got to watch what the Mexicans eat." I go, "What?" He goes, "Hey, trust me. He goes, "See this? You don't see any of these white people ordering this, do you?" I go, No, what is it?" He goes, "Okay, it's a certain soup they have, soup with baked all day and chicken and rice." Okay, let me try it. It was the best soup I ever had in my life. Phenomenal soup. And he actually said, towards the end, he said, "Hey, Kathy, my wife, makes this soup." I said, "Really? Wow. Can she show my wife, Kirsten?" They're friends. Says, "Hey," he said, "Yeah, no problem. Bring her over. We'll show her." So I talked to Kathy about it, and she's like, oh, I can show Kirsten how to do it. That's fine, yeah. I said, remember Kathy? I said, Kathy can cook, no doubt. I said, Kirsten, you know, she'll give it a shot. But, you know, kind of make the recipe a little simple. And I did. Sorry, honey. But Kathy, I thought, she said, okay, I'll make it. She'll be able to make it wonderful when she gets done. And I'm going to hold Kathy to that. And you still get some soup.
George is speaking fluent Spanish, of course he's born in Mexico, but fluent in Spanish. And we're in a car one time. He's setting up this deal with this Puerto Rican guy, and he's talking to him on the phone. And I'm in the drug unit. He's my partner, and I get this great idea. You know, hey, if I was fluent in Spanish, it would, you know, help me at the police department, the detective section. Maybe I could, you know, profit from it, you could say. So he gets off the phone, we're sitting there, and I'm driving, he's looking at me, and I go, hey, we ride in the car together every day. Maybe, you know, a little bit at a time, you could teach me Spanish, you know, so I could speak it. And he says, dude, you can't hardly speak English. I'm not wasting my time trying to teach you Spanish. So I never got to learn Spanish, but that was George. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. It was a little bit more colorful than that. But anyhow, Naya, he taught how to shoot. And the other girls, I think he taught too. But Naya seemed to me to hit it off more with wanting to shoot. And he was a big into guns, into shooting. And he always been that way. He was a fantastic shot. I mean, like, it was unbelievable what a good shot he was. But he would take his kids, and Naya especially hit it off, and he would spend time with her at the gun range or whatever. George liked to build guns, tear them down, build them some more. He was a gun collector. That's what he liked doing.
I'm going to miss you, brother, for sure. I love you, and we'll meet again. I get up there, set us up a couple lanes.
It was an honor going into battle with you. We'll take it from here, George.
And the world lost a hero. And I'm sorry he's gone.
Just remember that where you're going, the range is always open, and there's an endless supply of ammunition.
I love him. I miss him. He's my friend. That's what I'd say to him.
We all lost a good friend. He will never be forgotten, and I will always carry his memory with me from this point forward.
Oh, hey, one more thing. If you had any doubts whatsoever that this dude wasn't cool, check this picture out.